Tēnā koutou katoa ngā mihi nui kia koutou, and welcome to the last committee meeting for the year. We're going to start the meeting with a karakia, and Ihorangi has volunteered to do that for us today, so thank you, Ihorangi. Tai kia. Kia ora. Thank you very much, Ihorangi. We have apologies from Councillors Chugoff and Kewen today, and the Mayor is coming via Zoom in from home. Any other apologies, early departures? No? Do I have a mover for those? Sam, seconder, Tim, all in favour?
Aye.
Any against? No, carried, thank you very much. Declarations of interest. I think we've got a couple of small ones noted for the funding applications. Yep. So if any other ones pop up during the meeting, just please let us know. Thank you very much. Confirmation of previous minutes. Do I have a mover? Anne, seconder, Tim. All in favour?
Aye.
Any against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the public forum section of the meeting. And we have two of those today. So Ihorangi, if you'd like to come forward to the desk there, and if you switch your microphone on so it turns green. Yep, that's fine. So welcome. You'll be aware that you've got 5 minutes to talk to us about your issue today. Thank you very much.
Okay. The bus exchange opened in May 2015 with at the cost of $53 million. My issue today is around the youth that hang around in the exchange and their violence and just the youth that hang around the exchange and basically the violence. The youth that hang around the bus interchange all have some gang affiliation. At the moment there are around 15 to 20 people that hang around the bus exchange, and they're known as town bums. On Wednesday the 9th of December, I had my phone stolen from inside the bus exchange, and this wouldn't have happened if the security guard didn't let the person in, basically. The person is trespassed from both the exchange and the crossing. Also, I have heard through the security guards at the exchange that the trespassers are going to be wiped. There is a guy on the trespass list who groped one of the security guards and a young person at the bus interchange. And now they are allowed to have free rein, basically, of the bus exchange. You're allowed to go in and catch the buses. And they may well do it to another girl or a security guard. I have also been a witness to many fights at the exchange, and this is not okay. It's supposed to be a safe public place, but at the moment I don't think it's safe for me and the staff and also other customers. What I would like to see improve is more security guard and staff, the trespassers to stay, and either a youth worker or a youth aid officer to be present at the bus exchange. Any questions?
Thanks so much for that. So I've got questions here from Jake and Yanni.
My question's actually not very good, but those are fantastic suggestions. You said that the person that stole your phone was able to get into the bus exchange and pass by security. Do you think there's also an increased role for perhaps better training and better retention of who is and who isn't trespassed at any one point in time?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Yanni?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the suggestion. Have you talked to council staff at all about the arrangements of security?
I made a complaint.
And how was that handled? Like, what feedback did you get?
I haven't heard anything back.
Right. And just, do you think, like, I just was really interested in having a youth worker there, but do you have any thoughts on having a dedicated youth space, like a youth centre in the bus exchange? Would that be something that you think? Have you considered having a more permanent space rather than just a youth worker, and if so, what would that be?
That didn't come through my mind, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Tim, then James, at this time.
You mentioned when you were talking that someone had been trespassed but then had free range of the bus exchange. Could you can a wee bit more on that? Sorry, because if someone's trespassed, then they should not be there. Full stop.
So the person's trespass got wiped.
Ah, right. And do you know why that got wiped at all? Or is
Apparently the council are taking all trespass people off the list.
Well, we can check up on that. Yeah, I mean they do expire after a period of time, so I don't know. Yeah, James.
Tēnā koe, ihorangi. Apologies if you did mention this, but when I use the bus exchange, there are security people there. It's quite noticeable. Do you not see them?
I do, but they don't.
They're not active,
Yeah,
proactive.
not active.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I'd agree with that, to be frank. I noticed that.
Okay, so I think, thank you so much for coming in. There's no more questions, but what we are going to do is we're going to refer the issues that you've got onto staff, and we're going to get some information back for councillors and back for you as well, and might be able to share that with you. And we will see where we can go from there. But I think it'll be really good to have young people like yourself involved in that conversation of what to do as well. Okay? So thanks so much for coming in. Kia ora. Okay, so our next public forum is Dave Idale and Laurie Shaw, who are speaking on behalf of residents of Vogel Street regarding an OCHT development. So welcome, and if you could come up to the front. Now this was going to be multiple separate presentations, and what we've done is we've combined them into one 10-minute public forum instead. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So we have some slides to go up. The one thing with the slides is when the slides are up, you can't see the time at the same time.
Yeah, do you mind if I just grab my phone so I can use a stopwatch?
So you can have, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, because I don't want to over-talk.
Welcome.
Good morning. So I guess a bit of background. We've owned our house in Vogel Street since 2005. We rebuilt knowing that there was social housing behind us and that there was likely that that would be rebuilt at some point. So we're not against social housing. We understand that there's a need for it and it needs to be somewhere. We were hoping with the design for the rebuild that it would be sympathetic to previous developments that had happened on the site. So directly across the stream from Galton Place is another piece of social housing. It's mixed use, it's got 2-storey, single storey, it's built with permanent materials, it looks really nice. Unfortunately this is not the case. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous talking to other people. The proposed design is really none of these things. It is poor design. It will lead to dark units. It will lead to disputes within the tenants. It will lead to us losing our sunlight and privacy. There are 13 separate properties that back onto this development along Vogel Street. So this isn't a small impact in terms of our local area. Sunlight and privacy would be the two key components that we're really concerned about in terms of how this impacts. Sorry, I've lost my place. I'm surprised that the design is non-notifiable given the size and the scale of the units. They're simply not in keeping with what's already on site. And I feel that there could be some solutions that would be easy to be kind of, help with the design that they've put through. I mean, ideally we'd like to see a complete redesign that was more sympathetic to the area and also that would allow the units to have north-facing windows, because currently they don't in the proposed design. we understand that this has now gone to the planning area, and the likelihood of that happening is pretty low. So from our perspective, moving the units off the boundaries so that they're not so hard up against our boundary would massively impact on both our privacy and our sunlight. And we would also like to see a planting strip placed between the boundary and the redevelopment, so that we can help kind of increase the thing. The other thing is I'm also really kind of disturbed by the way that Otatahi Housing Trust has handled itself through this process. There were numerous inquiries made by multiple people to them over the periods that this was obvious to everyone that things were moving. These were universally ignored. We didn't hear back from them at all, period. So the only engagement that we got from them was once they had submitted the plans to council. And that's not really community engagement at that point. That's kind of just telling us what's going to happen, which is, I don't know, may as well take a notice out in the paper. And they've really used the whole process around the way that they've put the proposal together as a very much a box ticking exercise. Like, they've gone to the urban planners, they've gone to the pre-planning meetings, they've done a CPIT. You know, it's great that they've done all these things, but they've almost universally ignored all the recommendations from those things, and they've just picked the ones that suit their design, and then they'll tell us about how those are the most important things in their criteria. So we just kind of feel that it's, you know, there could have been a better way of doing this, and for an organisation which is basically de facto council, this is just not best practice. It's not even good practice, and I think the design shows that. I'll pass over to Laurie now.
Okay. I am a homeowner in a long row of 6 units where the OCHT plans to parallel their longest 2-storey block of 10 units directly to our west, significantly impinging on our privacy and sunlight in every single other unit's one. To quote the OCHT, the orientation of the block means overlooking between units to each other's internal living spaces is able to be minimised. However, the largest block has been designed to look straight into the living areas and bedrooms of those of us across the fence, and we will be looking straight back in their bedrooms. To quote, all outdoor living spaces will receive good levels of sunlight during the day. However, some of those yards will be in the shade of our building for much of the morning and their own building in the afternoon. Our yard will be plunged into darkness before 6 p.m. in the middle of summer. The implications for wintertime when sunlight means so much to people like me with seasonal affective disorder is disturbing. Due to multiple health conditions, I am home all day and in our yard. Our yard feeds us with its vegetables and fruits. It's a second living and dining space. It's a private sanctuary of greenery. It's my evening sun and sanity. Plants and people don't thrive without good light. Our family would not have bought here 28 years ago if it lacked privacy or good light to garden. Those were prime considerations. Until recently, we had no problem with social housing and are very much in favour of it. Problems arose in the neighbourhood with the massive HNZ block at the top of the street. They finally hired a security guard. I've heard that Delta Community Support Trust is overburdened. No suburb should be so impositioned with such high intensity social housing when other residents have needs too, and the growth of the city is happening elsewhere. With the Gowerton Place flats, one of my former neighbours needed to put a restraining order on a tenant of the trust. He was upfront that he was straight out of prison, and she was clear she wasn't interested in a relationship, but he'd come drunk banging on her door in the middle of the night and tried to force his way in. For the remainder of her time here, she was terrified, which entirely altered her life. She was like many of the tenants in the set of units we live in, a single mother with young children. I would like to know, for the safety of those in our units, what is the proportion of men who will be living in this upstairs block, and will they have criminal records like the one who harassed my neighbour? What is the strategy when incidences like this arise, given the bank of windows that will look straight into the bedrooms of women and children and into their yards? And conversely, what is their management strategy when they house vulnerable tenants whose own bedrooms face some of the current tenants in adjacent units to ours who have loud, vulgar domestics which would echo back and forth between buildings, or drug dealers that, despite the police getting multiple complaints, have shown little interest in policing? How do you justify this design where people are looking straight into each other's lives? Some on both sides may have quite a troubling element to them. OCHT have argued to us that it could be worse, but really it's in a similar league of bad design like the HNZ building. It's institutional, not home-like. For supremely pissing off the neighbours for robbing sun and privacy, they have managed to only gain 7 more units and introduce some of the worst aspects of higher density building in a neighbourhood that really doesn't need 7 extra units of social housing, nor to dismantle decades of goodwill. I was all in favour of rebuilding the council flats in better ways, so it flummoxes me that anyone could come up with a design that would pit neighbour against neighbour in a formally harmonious relationship. It doesn't serve its own tenants well in multiplying the number of shared walls and ceilings with each other and disrespecting both ours and their privacy and sunlight. The trust is supposed to be about meeting vulnerable people's housing needs, not eroding vulnerable neighbourhoods. They should do better by everyone. This is a mistake that will have many decades of repercussions. It's worth getting it right for the whole community. They could have been part of a force that helps maintain the special character of the neighbourhood, but choose to be a destructive force in the march of anonymising developments that treat people as stackables who don't need light, privacy or safety. I implore them to radically change their design.
Thank you. Are you speaking as well? Sorry?
No.
No.
He's been running
Just
this
leave.
Oh,
one.
you run the slide. Okay, so we do have 45 seconds if there's a single question. Otherwise, we have had a small amount of information through back from council staff, and I'm wondering, Jake, if you'd like to share that with them, because you're local councillor. Yep. And actually, if you would be able to facilitate a meeting with Kate or someone at OCHT, so that the residents can actually talk to OCHT about their concerns face to face. Is that all right? Because bearing in mind this particular property is not, so OCHT do operate and manage some council-owned facilities. These ones are not. So these are actually owned and operated by, and the development's being done by OCHT itself under that capacity. So Jake, if you're able to organise that and facilitate a meeting, and then maybe report back to us as council to see if there's anything that we need to be looking at, that would be really useful. Okay, thanks so much for coming in. So when I looked around initially, the first 10 seconds and looked for questions, I didn't see a hand, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to check, obviously I'm on the trust.
Yeah, so I just, yeah.
Yeah, just want to make that clear.
Well, if you're stepping back, you're stepping back.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe you would like to go to the meeting with Jake? Would that be really helpful?
No, I did think in the information that got provided, it may be appropriate that council and the trust do talk through some of these planning issues, but that's up for you guys.
Yeah.
But there is a relationship between trust and council.
There is, yeah.
And it's just how that information gets conveyed. But yeah, I'm just going to not participate in this because
I think we thank you. Okay, so Jake will bring back any information and ways forward that you think that need to happen there. That would be really good.
The OCHT, the trust does have very strong wraparound services for their units, if that's of any help to you as well,
So I think
which
that-
will come out of the
It
meeting.
doesn't solve the privacy issues.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't
So-
solve the
So
sunlight
that
issues
there's a
either.
broad range of issues there, and I think that the best way to do that is to deal face to face. And Jake, if you
They
need help
have not been
facilitating that,
interested
then
in
Bruce will.
Doing
Yeah.
that. That's
Okay.
part of our complaint.
Plus,
Okay.
they also sublet a number of the units in the existing thing out to the Salvation Army, which had different clients and different policies and different management strategies, and that
Okay.
caused issues.
So we will, take that. Okay. So thanks so much for coming in and raising those concerns with us today. Right, next we move to deputations by appointment. So deputations are different to public forum in that they relate to items actually already on the agenda. And so the first of those today will be Joanna Gould, who's speaking regarding the Community Facilities Network Plan. So Joanna, you're aware that this is, you've got 10 minutes?
Yep,
And that it's about the plan itself rather than any individual facility that you might like a decision on at some point.
Good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Community Facilities Network Plan report. I don't agree that there are no gaps in this plan. I agree with other submitters that this plan does not seem thorough enough. I don't agree that the process outlined in question 2 of the consultation is sufficient to address the residents' needs. Yes, community facilities should be community-led, but not all facilities should involve having a community partner. Community facilities are a service provided by council to serve the residents in their communities. They are not for community partnerships with groups, churches or trusts. They are for the residents. Yes, community needs must be demonstrated. A feasibility study needs to be done by local council staff, not consultants. Local council staff have intellectual property, history of the area, knowledge of the community and residents' needs. The feasibility study should be open and transparent, e.g. workshops should include interested residents as well as elected members. I do agree that a business case should be done by local council staff and council's role needs to be well established. I don't agree that community boards should solely make decisions on community facilities. Board members are lay people and elections are held every 3 years. How are new board members able to make informed decisions on establishing or disestablishing a community facility? I have a number of concerns. Firstly, this plan doesn't take into account the increase in social housing and infill housing in certain suburbs. Secondly, I am concerned that the changes to the district plan have not been considered thoroughly enough, especially changes to residential living density zones. Thirdly, it concerns me that developer contributions collected in my area are not being reinvested into community facilities in my area. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Joanna. So there's time for questions. Melanie?
Regarding the comment about community boards,
Yeah.
who do you think should have the decision making there?
I think it needs to be a combined effort for everybody involved, that it shouldn't just be solely the task of community boards, because council staff have a lot of intellectual property. They know the areas, they are specialists in their, they've trained in those areas. So community board members, as I said, are just lay people. They're not trained specifically to design community centres or understand urban development or the social issues, different communities.
So when you say everyone, who do you mean exactly?
Council, community boards, stakeholders and residents. It needs to be a combined effort.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? So Joanna, at the moment we have a process whereby if a facility was going to be established or disestablished or those kind of things, there would be a proposal put together by those sort of expert staff.
Yeah.
That then would probably go out for stakeholder and community consultation, and that feedback would come in, and then the community board would make a decision. Does that help?
Yeah, I
with
don't
that?
think enough emphasis is actually given to the residents. I think more consultation is done with stakeholders rather than residents, and as I said before, the community facilities are actually a service for residents, and so I think the focus needs to be kind of redirected to what the community, what the residents actually need, rather than who the stakeholder is, who the community partnerships are, because they're just doing a role, whereas they're a service for residents.
Yeah. So one of the things we have heard is that there's some concern about that, the emphasis on partnerships and trying to get as many partners as possible, and that some communities won't have the capacity for that. So we do have some wording to soften that for today.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and so that it talks about helping develop capacity in communities, and that, you know, we'd like to increase it, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Is that sound all right?
I'm interested in seeing opportunities to empower residents. Like it seems to be that the stakeholders get to say what activities and events and things happen in community facilities, whereas with all the issues and social isolation, I think it's more important that we start empowering some of the residents from the bottom up to provide them with opportunities to say what do they want to do in their community facilities, rather than having people tell them what they're going to provide for them in their community facilities.
Thank you. Anne?
Kia ora, thank you, Joanna. And just further to that,
Yeah.
how do you think that could happen? What would be the best way to get that voice coming through? Would it be a community meeting at a library, or?
Yeah, the workshops are a good idea, because then not everybody's interested in discussing community facilities and community development. It's boring to some people. But those that are actually interested in supporting residents and giving them a voice and empowering them to find different ways to use different facilities in creative ways and get the uses out on the community facilities. Yeah, I think just having more open and honest conversations and not waiting till consultation stages, that there's more opportunities at community board level to discuss these issues.
Can you see an opportunity for things like neighbourhood support to perhaps be a vehicle through which people can get together and chat?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking about something else too. A residents' association. So have you got one that you're active in?
No, I'm not active in my one, no.
No, but there are quite a few, aren't there? And that they're also a good vehicle through which we can have these discussions.
Yeah. My concern is that residents' associations get taken over and it becomes a combined voice of the residents, rather than every resident gets to say their individual take on the situation and what they would actually like. So, yeah.
So I think one of the things to notice is that this is trying to be an enabling document. So there are plenty of community facilities, one in my local area, for example, where they asked the community what type of activities would you like, and then they tried to find the right sort of ones for the community.
Yeah.
So
No, that sounds great.
yeah, and I know the same's happening with Linwood Pool at the moment as well. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for
Okay.
your time.
Thank you so much for your time. Okay. Next we have Graham Spinks, who's also talking to us on the Community Facilities Network Plan on behalf of Christchurch Martial Arts Community. Welcome, Graham.
Thank you for inviting me. I just wanted to say that I don't think there are suitable numbers of facilities in Christchurch to meet the needs of the community, especially East Side. It was one of the nights that prompted me to call and inquire if I could talk today. Particularly martial arts groups, we tend to hide away in our white pyjamas and small buildings and grapple each other or kick and punch each other to our heart's content. But it's been a lot more difficult for a lot of people to engage in this sort of recreational activity that provides discipline in the community. Since the earthquakes hit, there was a plethora of school halls and especially school halls and scout halls and what have you that have all been taken over by other businesses and Oscar businesses, etc., that are not available now for community groups to go into. Places at a cheap rate to provide discipline for our community that need it most. And if you want to see what they're doing right now, you just need to go outside Linwood McDonald's at 11 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night and have a look at what they're up to. And I challenge people to do that, because that's quite a tough thing to do, to stand out on the street there. And I know that countries that deal with these sort of problems, what they do is they have these sort of problems and they solve them by engaging after-school activities for children at a cheap rate. And it's just not happening. And you wonder why there's no discipline, you wonder why people are assaulted, you wonder why kids drift into gangs, and you have these social housing issues and drugs and associated problems, and they can be solved by careful planning. And I think that that's what needs to happen, particularly East Side. West Side's been catered for by some rich Russian, thank God for him. He's engaging all the children in Rolleston and those areas with Olympic sports, and I think that's a grand gesture on his behalf, but we need better planning on East Side, that's for sure. And my own circumstances, I've run a dojo for years in judo, and particularly I've fostered other martial arts because I believe it's a great way to instill disciplines in communities, but we were disestablished with the earthquakes. We were on a park, we had cheap rates for kids. Now we had to go to a commercial model, and it doesn't really suit most people that really need the training. And I say these people really need the training. When I say that, I really mean it. I'm talking about kids with problems, anger management problems, etc., that tend to drift in towards martial arts clubs when they can afford it, or when the parents can afford to get them there, you know? And I just don't think we're in the right spot in a commercial venue, and I noticed that there's so many around our area in Sherm Street, there's so many similar clubs in similar situations have to drift to commercial models. I mean, cripes, in other countries in Europe, they foster martial arts clubs. And the reason they foster them is because they want children with self-control in their community, with good discipline and good self-defence, and that actually drives down the number of assaults at the angry age. If you train your children well and you discipline them well, you don't have problems when they're teens and hit the alcohol-crazed stage of life that people tend to roll through. And that's been proven. So our particular club, and group of clubs, we have a group of them, and I find it difficult that a third of our members are consistently in arrears, and yet we're trying to get a change of use from the City Council now, and we've got to engage architects and engineers on our side for a change of use that is for the City Council to get the permits to get a change of use, and they're arguing fine points of the change of use at $200 an hour each. I find it insulting, obscene that while they're arguing a combined total of $400 an hour, that some family can't afford to come in and pay $50 a month for their kid to do kickboxing, and yet we're paying these same fees. You know, we're community based, and lots of community based groups are disenfranchised since the earthquakes, and COVID hasn't helped, of course. And I just think, you know, that if we look after the more vulnerable people, a lot of things fall into place in society. You know, you've got to call me a socialist, but you know, I believe in that. End of speech, I think.
Okay, are you open to some questions?
Yes.
So just before we get into other questions, my first question is, what is it that you would like changed in the plan? So I know you've got some issues around other stuff at the moment.
Don't think you've got your ticks and boxes covered by saying that you've got enough facilities. You know, you haven't. It's clearly shown, because if you look at the cheap seats in Sherm Street, you start looking down there and all these different clubs and organisations are moving into those cheap warehouses and having to take up commercial models because of a lack of facilities and community at community level. Well, you know, you look after soccer and rugby, they've got fields to play on. The likes of martial arts, we need these cheap halls to foster community spirit, and then they're not there. You know, it's swimming in Auckland at the Commonwealth Games got a new venue where boxing and judo, we were put in some hall, and then after the hall we were disenfranchised as sports, while athletics got a new track and field stadium, while swimming got their stadium, while hockey got a stadium. You know, where's the hat that we can hang our coat on for martial arts groups?
Okay, so I think we've got a couple of other questions as well. So Melanie, and then Yanni, and then James.
Within this plan, it talks about work being underway to look at the condition of different buildings. Our community board that I'm on talked about looking at not just the number of facilities that are around, but how much spare time that they have available to take on groups that could use them, like space that people could use, and also the cost of them. Do you think that's something that should be included in this plan that would then give the information that you're...
I looked at that, the new stadium that you're going to build right in the centre of town, and looked at the pricing for the units, and I went, well, it's unbelievable. What are you going to get people? You're only going to get professional people from the west side of town engaged with that community. You're not engaging the east side. I mean, half the people on the east side, they can't afford, like they get a full job, and then a month later they're only working 20 hours or 10 hours a week. I mean, how can they budget their own lives around that sort of lifestyle, let alone afford, you know, getting the kids into clubs and doing things. It's just not feasible from their point of view.
Okay,
You know,
thanks.
it's just, I feel that poverty is driving a lot of the problems in that community, and you know, unless we have affordable activities for the children to engage, there's going to be some angry kids out there.
Yeah. So we've got Yanni, then James.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the deputation. I just wondered if you think there's a need for council to have, because the staff advice has been that this isn't for sports groups, this is community facilities plan. So just in terms of moving forward, having a sports network plan where the sporting facilities and recreation facilities are clearly shown and gaps identified as you've said, and a process to look at what's needed, is that something that you think would be needed?
What works? I can speak to what works within martial arts. Or what I can say what doesn't work. When we had the old community centres and we tried to mix it up with other sports, they come in there and they stomp all over our mats. They disrespect them. That doesn't work. Only what works for us is we have to have dedicated mat space committed to a particular group. So together sharing a facility is fine, but they need separate rooms for separate groups, and that works better in that way, because it doesn't work any other way, because we don't get the, you know, like our martial arts particularly, we have a lot of foreigners involved, you know, like immigrants, I should say, immigrants to our country get involved, and a lot of poorer, well, the Pacifica community and the local people. They're the most of our members, I suppose.
Yeah. So
you know, when we
I'm
look
going
at
to
it.
try and get one last question in. Pauline?
Yeah, thanks, Graham, a really good submission. How many martial arts groups are there in Christchurch, do you know, and is there a collective?
Well, before the earthquakes, I counted them as 120, and after the earthquakes, I haven't actually counted them, but I reckon we're down to about half. And those that are surviving had to adopt a commercial model. The thing is, we've lost the whole tier of a considerable number of the cheaper clubs have gone, and that's been part of the problem, is that they've got nowhere to go right now, and they've got to. For instance, our club, we're trying to survive on that edge, trying to make fees affordable, but we're getting bitten at the other end with costs because we're in this commercial situation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a really good message to hear, and I also fully support the benefits of it as well.
But I believe the numbers are significant. I believe that we'd rival hockey. If our combined total of martial arts would rival the likes of hockey. I wouldn't say soccer, but we're huge. We are huge.
So we will have to wind up there.
Yep.
What I will do, if you just, it's just there's two things. Firstly, I don't know who your local councillor is, but the other issues that you've got at the moment around consenting and things, maybe a conversation with the local councillor might be helpful, just to look at the process there. And the other thing is, if you're looking at affordability at the moment, we'll get you in touch with our funding staff, because it may be that there's ways to get some funding for lower income families to help get those kids involved as well through the local community board, maybe. Yeah, so we might try and get some information to you in that space as well. We'll run out of time now, but we could. That's not for the topic for today. So we'll get some information to you on some funding avenues as well.
And can we hear back from staff on the sports network plan and where that's got to?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
I mean, we'll do it when we consider this, but I'll...
Okay, thanks so much, Graham.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Mark Gerard, who's going to speak on behalf of Historic Places Canterbury regarding the Heritage Incentive Grants and the Intangible Grants. Welcome, Mark.
Councillors, thank you very much. I was expecting, it's a verbal submission, there's nothing written, so you can relax. I wasn't expecting a deputation, so thank you.
That's on the agenda.
So this is, thank you for the opportunity to make the submission of deputation, which has made reference to the following items on the council agenda before you. That's item number 11, the Heritage Incentive Grant funding, updates to eligibility and guidelines, and number 12, intangible heritage grant fundings guidelines for a new grant scheme. The submission will be verbal and brief, as Historic Places Canterbury wishes to inform the councillors that it endorses the staff report's recommendations on both agenda items. That's the theme. Turning to specific items, on agenda item 11, as regards Heritage Incentive Grant funding, Historic Places request the council's approve the staff recommendations as outlined in the report. The proposed changes align the Heritage Incentive Grant funding with the council's Our Heritage, Our Taonga Heritage Strategy 2019-2029. Historic Places Canterbury, as you are aware, applauded the council for the formulation and adopting of this heritage strategy. HPC considers the expansion of the grant criteria as in keeping with the intent of the heritage strategy. COVID-19 has had an effect on the Christchurch economy, whilst thankfully not as marked as the rest of the world, resulting in heritage buildings projects that have been postponed. HPC endorses the staff recommendations that the unassigned funds be carried over, as we expect there will be a lift in activity as heritage building projects are reactivated. We should point out, as the obvious, that such funding provides an incentive for owners to invest, which should be and will be welcomed by councillors as it aids the city's recovery. Carryover funding allows proposed projects to be reactivated. Moving to agenda item 12, intangible heritage grant funding guidelines for a new grant scheme. HPC recommends the councils approve the report's recommendations. HPC considers this aligns with the council's heritage strategy in developing and diversifying its role in and in support of the city's heritage. In this regard, HPC requests the councils approve the purpose of the Intangible Heritage Grant Fund, and we also endorse the recommendation that the funding for the Intangible Heritage Grant funding be carried over. And finally, on another note, councillors, Historic Places Canterbury wishes to thank you for your efforts, and we include the council staff in what has been a fragmented year. That's an understatement. We hope you managed to enjoy some smartphone-free quality Christmas, New Year holiday time with your partners and families. And as a recovering, almost completely recovered political spouse, the importance of the cell phone-free area for families where you can't sneak and look at your emails when they're not looking is important. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the very timely advice on that. My family thanks you. Any questions for Mark? No? Thank you very much for coming in. Okay, so presentation of petitions. There are none today, which is excellent. And now we move to the Community Facilities Network Plan. So welcome, John, Paul.
Sylvia is not George and Ringo, unfortunately.
No. Welcome, everyone. We've had the two deputations today based on this, as well as the engagement. Based on the deputations we've had today, is there anything further that you would look at changing on that, based on that engagement?
Look, thank you, Sarah. This committee saw the draft plan and the proposed consultative process back in July, August, and we've been out and engaged extensively. You can see we've got a wide range of feedback, and the council report itself and supporting information details how that feedback has been taken on. In particular, we have listened intently and softened the requirement or perceived requirement for facilities to be always developed in partnership. We're now very, very clear that, look, that's a preference. However, if there are circumstances where there's just not appropriate, council will continue to take on the lead role. That's reflected in the plan. It's also been further strengthened in the recommendation that we'd like you to consider. I would like to give some reassurance to Joe Gould over the rigour and the inclusiveness of a feasibility and a business plan stage to inform the community board on decision making on community facilities. But I would like to re-emphasise the value that we place around community boards as being the decision makers. They are elected and they are closest to their communities of interest, and we find that with these locally based facilities, they do provide the best decision making forum. To answer your question, Sarah, and sorry I've taken some time, I would like to re-emphasise the second recommendation, where noting that the implementation of this plan will come back to this committee in a year's time, and I'd probably like to strengthen that recommendation, because if there are any changes in the environment, changes in facilities, changes in the nature of communities of need that need to be reported and reflected, that is the medium to do so. So I think what we've heard kind of strengthens that. Lastly, I'd like to say that Graham Spinks, we've actually spent some time over yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening with our colleagues at Recreation, Sports and Events. David Bailey, the manager's been and have a talk to Graham. We do think that there is work that we can do together to assist Graham and martial arts. And if it has taken this community consultation to bring parties closer together, well, it wasn't expected, it wasn't completely in the scope of the plan, but I'm very, very glad it's happened, and we do have capacity to be able to help martial arts. They will be treated as community customers at community rates, and look, I think only good can happen from that, and we'd probably like to invite Graham to come back at a later stage and let us know how things have gone.
Great.
Thank you.
And just quickly before it gets asked, an update. Just making sure we've got a note to make sure that we get an update on the sports network plan as well.
Yep.
Facilities, yeah.
Very much so.
So we've got Pauline, Mike, Jimmy, and Tim.
Yeah, John, my question's regarding finance and the cost of running the centres.
Yeah.
So you've got a council-run centre where council pays for everything. They'll pay for the staffing, they'll pay for the bookings, they'll pay maintenance, etc.
Yeah.
Then if you go the other end, which is what we're wanting, is the community running it, getting enough bookings to make it self-sufficient, etc. Now, not all community facilities are the same. You can go from one room facilities, which have a very limited opportunity to raise funds to run the thing, or a multi-roomed thing, which the 10 Shirley Road was very good at that, and that was stood on its own feet. There must be a hybrid in the middle where we share some costs, and that kind of thing hasn't really been addressed in the plan, so unless I've missed it.
Yeah. Paul, in the plan there's certainly hybrid. There are a couple of examples. There are at least 5 models there of how the council and the community work together. They going from council doing everything to council maybe providing a loan and communities get on with it. Within each of our leases and different arrangements with community groups operating facilities, there are different levels of council contribution, and this is current practice. So council will play to its strengths and fund where it's most appropriate. We will fund structure, building structure. We'll fund external maintenance, compliance, insurance, electrical, plumbing, gas. Where the communities are able to, and where they can, through volunteers or fundraising, look after the internal, maybe paint the wall, internal walls, cover power, cover cleaning costs, because they're better placed to do so through volunteers or community deals that we can't get.
So
We do that. So we currently have a very flexible system of that. We also offer community funding. It's emphasised strongly in the plan that our intent is not to let partner organisations fail. Success is all playing to our strengths. And I think if you were to talk to some of the more recent examples, like say Project Littleton and the Littleton Centre Trust, there's a prime example of us really doing that. We set these things up to succeed. If they're not, we'll come in and help.
So what you're saying is that any hybrid model, let's call it that, is sorted out at the time of signing a lease?
Absolutely.
Where,
and more recently, if partner organisations are unwilling to go into a lease with higher level obligations, we have what's called an access agreement, where we simplify markedly, and all sides are very, very clear on their obligations, and we play to our strengths.
Right, thank you. That's a really good answer. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. I know it's in the plan, and this seemed to be a theme for a number of feedback too. Around the citywide, there are currently no significant major geographical gaps in the network of all council and non-council owned facilities are considered. I'm not too sure if I agree with that completely, but actually one of the best feedbacks I read was actually from the Waihoru Sprayed and Cashmere Community Board. Sorry. Where they actually said, you know, that the data's not there to show actually the cost of these community facilities to people. And actually, if you start to look at that, potentially there will be significant gaps for people that can't actually afford to use many of these facilities. So I just don't think the wording in there's right in terms of actually this no gap then.
Yeah, Mike, the wording is carefully chosen, and that there are no significant geographical gaps, but we do say in a number of areas, however, look at the north and look at the southwest. They look at the north first and then the southwest, because geographically that's where, you know, we're either just upon a gap or a gap's going to come pretty quickly with the infill housing development. Secondly, and most significantly, the plan does explicitly say new developments, changes are likely to be driven by changes in community need and changes in circumstance. And we quoted the Multicultural Centre as an example of that. So the scenario that you've envisaged and that was raised by Sprayed and Cashmere are areas that are experiencing the withdrawal of other facilities or financial pressures or groups falling over. Those are the sorts of community needs, the changes in demographic, which will trigger the need to look at new or changed facilities. And if we haven't made that explicitly clear, we can certainly strengthen that wording.
Oh, yeah, it's just, to me, when I look at it, we don't know if there's gaps because we don't actually know the cost to the communities to hire all these buildings. And actually, if we knew that, then it may suddenly say, actually, these buildings aren't accessible to a number of people in the community, and then suddenly there is a gap already in existence in this community. So to me, it's just a little bit too generic, I guess, and it's not really saying what the true situation is for certain communities.
Mike,
Probably one more response to that, if I may, through you, Madam. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, is there a change that you'd like or additional information based on that, or are you just expressing a concern? Because it talks about, it specifies geographic and your concerns about access to those ones in the geographic spaces, is that right? So would you like some more information included on... Okay, thanks. Yeah. John, were you going to add to that?
No, just to note that under the implementation plan, one of the actions is to collate more information on facilities that council doesn't own. So when I referred earlier to reporting back to the community year's time on the implementation plan, we would aim to have filled a lot of that gap of information to allow better decision making. It's just part of the process. We're not in a position to report it now.
No. And when it comes to community facilities that are council owned, that's something that when it comes to affordability we're in charge of for fees and charges and stuff. Okay, thanks. Jimmy, and then Tim, then Anne, then Mel.
Okay, thank you. Mike, regarding the future development, based on the community themselves and request to have a multiple center, or maybe the developer southwest whatever. But my question is, even like a multiple center, like last year council balance secure, but still when we to take over this one to be a more formal operation, probably still need to take another 2 years, etc. But what is the transition period regarding to the multi-ethnic community level request? For instance, over the last year, Yanni covered some other countries as well. Kenya, Nepal, Afghanistan, Kenya, India, Tamil, they always request engage with us. Also, I refer to the start. They want to either to secure a piece of land, lease to land, they can build up their own facility, or they can, long-term, kind of permanently can, to lease a council on the facility, just permanent, not just 1 or 2 times, long-term once a week, they can continue use. I don't know how to meet these needs.
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
So Jimmy, are you making...
Because the multicultural kind of center, a moment not yet to be ready.
Yeah.
But based on our multicultural strategy, particularly for 2, they are equally to as a council service facility. But how to make that happen?
Yeah.
So Jimmy, when it comes to the plan, this plan, are there concerns that you've got with this plan? Does it not say, because it talks about communities that need, and says that we will help communities that need.
But it's difficult to make it happen, to meet their needs.
But that's
This
for
is
those
just-
communities to go to the community boards or to those areas in council to assist them to facilitate the facilities. This,
Yeah. John, do you have
That's-
anything to add there?
Yes, I do. Firstly, the council still has a 17, 19 facilities for hire? 17 facilities for hire around the city, and we're happy to take bookings from all areas of the community. The reason that we choose to hire a number of these facilities is to make sure that they're accessible. Secondly, we've got a multicultural committee and staff working on implementing a multicultural strategy, which includes reaching out to different communities and assisting them directly. Thirdly, we've got community development staff working with community boards in each area of town, and from time to time the issues come up and we provide solutions. Probably lastly, we have funding relationships with a large amount of ethnically diverse community organisations in order to provide access to facilities for events and other activities that sort of allow us to increase the celebration of cultural diversity in the city. So there are a number of mechanisms, probably outside the scope of this plan, which is largely, facility based.
Thank you.
Tim.
thank you, John. Following on from what Graham brought in the old days, you used to turn up and you'd be able to put the bags and things for boxing or whatever it was, taekwondo, whatever it was, under, you'd have the old stage in the hall, and you'd have an area, and a lot of the stuff was, your gloves and stuff were personal.
Yeah.
With our new facilities that we've built, do we take that type of thing into account? Because it'd be hard to, say, lease a building to one organisation to try and minimise the cost of running it. Is that am I on the right track, or?
Yeah, couple of things from my experience. So martial arts, they need mats. Some facilities, when the martial arts use is not sort of predominant, it's not huge, we will have spaces that the mats can be stored and then moved out, and you can have your session and move back again. The more that facility is used for the activity and the higher level of that activity, the less convenient it is to move these things in and out. If the facility gets too specialist, the value of the equipment and the time taken and the safety implications of setting it up and pulling it down get prohibitive. So the issue will be, as the activity grows, a question with us is, you'll reach the point where you probably need exclusive use of that facility. And in certain facilities, yes, that's absolutely fine. In other facilities, when those agreements come before community boards, who are the deciders, they will weigh up the public interest in having a range of access to that facility, or the public interest in really serving a community like the martial arts community well, and having it a lot more dedicated to that facility.
So with say, rather than having it dedicated to, say, judo, which needs the mats, a lot of them need the hanging points for the... So would there be an opportunity to look at a facility and, say, cross-lease to a number of martial arts or boxing, would it cross...
Yeah. And that would be a discussion that we would have, probably led by David Bailey in Rec Sports and Events, and it's... once you start getting into a specialisation like that, it moves out of the general purpose community facility more into a recreational and sport facility. I know from talking with David last night, they do have capacity and they do have facilities, and it might be a very, very useful conversation with Graham and other members of the martial arts community. They might get a lot of benefit out of this morning, tell you the truth.
That's great, thank you. And then Mel.
Yeah, kia ora, thank you. I mean, it's incredibly complex, all this. You've got so multi-layers of stuff to think about and organise. So a couple of questions following on from Joanna's point about elected members change and the knowledge of the community changes with that.
Yeah.
How are you thinking that that knowledge will continue and be,
Yeah, very, very good question, Anne.
Yeah.
A number of things have improved. We now have a far superior, very comprehensive asset management plan in place. The latest iteration that we included was July. We're just about to sign off a December. An awful lot of this institutional information is captured in that plan. It's in trim, it's our records, it's kept up to date, and it's very thorough. The second thing that this exercise has allowed us to do is build up the first ever big picture of facilities, their properties, their capabilities in and around town. And of course, we're not there yet. We've started. We aim to work with our smart cities people to have a really good interactive map where you can, a member of the public can ping on to a facility. It may be ours, it may be a partner organisation's, to say, this is the Huntsbury Hall, it's available for hire XYZ, its dimensions are this, its price is this. It's an improvement task in the plan. Should you guys approve the plan today, and we would aim to report back to this committee in a year's time to let you know how we've got on. And essentially, it's a wee bit of an extension to what Mike was saying, Councillor Davidson, earlier on. Mike's questions were more, how can you inform planning? How can you identify areas of need? Your question is, how do we let people know about these things? Where do we keep this information? So there's two fast sources of truth that, truth, wrong word, but two fast sources of information that we're considering.
That's fantastic, and I think giving that information regularly to, maybe even annually, to the community board. So what's just reminding and great that you're talking about smart cities and using that, because that was my question, whether you could do that, because
Absolutely.
it's a fantastic place for people to get information, and if they could just push on and say, you know, what do I need, when is it available, how much is it going to cost. The cost thing is interesting. Obviously it's a barrier. Any thoughts about how we could make it more equitable in terms of the sort of things that Graham was talking about?
The costs for council facilities are in councillors' control, and they discuss it annually. Generally speaking, partnership agreements, if we have a lease, it is at a peppercorn. The costs are divided between the council contribution, as I said, and the operator contribution. We always aim for the operator to be able to charge a modest amount to cover their costs, so they are sustainable. If there's a gap, it's community funding or a different lease arrangement, and they're bespoke depending on the nature of the facility. New ones with lots of flash things that people want to go to, we need less help. Older ones that are clearly in need of a bit of maintenance, but are nevertheless very valuable to the community, we'll provide more help.
Thank you. Mel, and then Yanni.
Two questions. One, can you comment on what Graham was talking about with the change of use? Like, I didn't understand what that was referring to, or...
I think he's got a consenting issue. I think they're doing a change of use for a building that they currently have. It's not a community facility.
So, the second point was really what Mike talked about before. What our community board was talking about was affordability, but it was also just basically availability. I mean, you could have 10 community centres in one block, but if they're all filled up all the time, you can't get in there, then there's no availability. So, and I know that staff responded to that, but I really feel like, and I should have said this earlier, but I do think, because we do have a sentence in there about facility asset condition and works underway to look at that for council facilities. I really think that we should actually have something in there that says that works underway to assess availability and affordability of council-owned facilities to determine significant gaps, because you did respond back to say that you would work with community boards to see if there are any gaps, but if we're stating a sentence in this plan that says there are no significant geographical gaps,
So you
that's a fact. It reads as a fact, and it may not necessarily be 100% true.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, so are we able to have a sentence in there that talks, so just
So,
the wording that you've got?
I just wrote it down.
Yeah.
I can email
I
it.
think
but
we add it to the.
Add it to-
It would go into
add it
page
to the
8.
resolution and put it formally in the implementation plan.
Yeah, that would, are you happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. So if you flick it through to Aidan, that would be great. Okay, Yanni.
Thanks. I was just wondering what assessment we've done of the current community managed facilities governance to assess how it's working and whether this is the right approach going forward. Like, have we done any sort of in-depth assessment of the skills of community governance, the ability, the strengths, weaknesses?
Yeah. Look, not a lot, because it was outside the scope of the plan. When we first looked at the scope of the plan with the antecedent Social Housing Community Development Committee and subsequently this committee, we were reasonably specific about what the plan would cover and what it wouldn't, and the capacity of community organisations as is wasn't included in the scope. But look, what I can say is we have a considerable investment on an ongoing basis through either civic-based staff such as Paul and Sylvia and community-based staff located in every single ward who liaise directly with community groups, help where they can. They try not to impose, and sometimes they said, look, keep away. We invest considerable sums in things like Leadership Lab, where we empower and train local community leaders. So all these processes are operative. I certainly can't say that every group is functioning well, but what I can say is there's an awful lot of centres out there that are run incredibly well. They've got engaged clientele. And from time to time we support them. We did an exercise immediately post-COVID where we approached about 230 community-based organisations, and the feedback was largely, yep, we're okay, but we might need some support. And a lot of the feedback was reflected in the advice we provided to the committee you convened, regarding the Strengthening Communities Fund. So there are a wide range of support mechanisms out there working alongside this plan, because the scope of this plan wasn't actually the health of community organisations. Probably in addition, the community development team and our strategy and policy team have recently done some work on community capacity, and that will be shared with boards in the near future.
So I'm just trying to understand, if we're adopting a sort of high level principle to have more community managed facilities, but we don't understand in sufficient detail, and we haven't done any review of the way in which these facilities have been community run, then it feels like a gap.
So, Yanni, we've
Like
got
if
some...
I compare it to the Board of Trustees, which I think I emailed around councillors, like the Ministry of Education has done something quite similar, looking at schools and how they're governed and managed. And it's quite interesting when you read through that, the parallels to...
Yanni, but what we have just heard from John is that that specific stuff was actually outside of the scope of the plan when that was developed by the previous committee, which you sat on. And that work is ongoing. We have
repeatedly raised at every briefing that we've had at our board and at workshops to the appropriate committee. The key question has consistently been raised: what review have we done of community managed facilities to identify the challenges that they've faced, so that we can learn from it? So you can say it's out of scope, but it's not through lack of being raised. And I just think going forward, like because I get the community development stuff, that's probably the easiest part of this. The more difficult issue is around things like human resources, employment law, and probably the legal aspects of some of these ways in which community managed facilities occur.
We're dealing with the network facilities plan right now. We can take that offline, and
But
that's fine. I'm happy
sorry,
to
the
chase up on
goal is to give, like, and we're still talking about increasing community managed council facilities.
and developing the capacity of the communities to be able to
Yeah.
do that at the same time.
Yeah.
So can we get an action then that actually looks at how the community managed ones have been functioning to review the adequacy or inadequacy of that and look at what's required going forward? I mean, I would have thought that's a pretty
fine. You've given lots of
sensible
context there. That's fine.
thing to do.
We'll leave to John.
So can we add it to the implementation plan?
It's not part of this plan. An action like that is an awful lot of work, and I would want to be able to work with my colleagues, identify the scope of an exercise like that and bring it back to this committee so they could talk about this in terms of other organisational priorities before committing.
So John, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
We can have a look at the scope. Would it be fair to say that if there, and I know that there have been cases in the past where there has been some concerns about how a facility is being run or managed, or if an organisation is struggling,
Yeah.
what has happened in that case?
Yeah, the recent example.
Don't give a recent example.
No.
Just generally.
Yeah.
Staff help out.
Generally speaking, first of all, a conversation's undertaken in a discreet way, so it's not seen that the council or the community are bowling in and muscling or committing to a predetermined result. Usually there's a conversation, how are you going? Is there anything we can assist with? The conversations usually happen through community development advisors or centrally based staff. Sometimes we'll ask elected members to move in. A very successful way of doing this is the way we managed, I think anyway, at community-based early learning centres, where we did uncover a raft of issues. And through Gary Watson's team, we're able to produce a one-stop shop council response, which required some funding, collaboration with the Ministry of Development, who looked after a lot of the skills-based stuff, collaboration with our asset team, and we've now got a safe and secure network going forward. Yeah. So there are the provisions to do that, and probably also like to say that where we say, look, a preference working partnerships going forward, we've got 3 live examples. They're all mentioned in the implementation plan. The St Albans Community Centre, working with a community organisation, SARA. They're independent, they're capable, they're coming to us and we're going to them with ideas on how we play to our strengths, and it seems to be going very well. The other 2 examples, the Opawa Volunteer Library, again, robust, good organisation, need assistance in certain areas and not in other areas. The third one's Manuka Cottage. They are, again, that they're all going pretty well. Those are sort of live examples at the moment. If any organisations are experiencing difficulties, we are here to help, and we've got the capacity to do that.
So we just wind off this particular one. So Yanni's requested some further work be done to look at a whole review of all of our facilities that are managed. Of course, that would only do council facilities and not all the other community ones. Do people want a scoping thing done on that, or just leave it to staff on a case-by-case
Leave
basis
it to
as
the
things
community
pop up?
boards and
The governance staff are well aware of
Hang on a
this.
sec, Yanni.
Yeah.
So
So
if
it's too much.
someone raises something, that's fine, but do people generally want staff to go away and do this extra bit of work for us, or are we just happy to leave it for now?
Just not a balanced report.
Andrew?
I mean, I think
just
that,
on this particular thing.
yeah, I think it
That's
leads
a
to a
lot
further
more to
question to what extent what we know about the way that community facilities that are run in partnership, to what extent has that influenced what's in this particular plan, and I'm assuming it has. If we can be confident that what we know about the good, the bad and the otherwise of the way that we're doing this in partnership with groups already, and there are good examples out there, and there are good examples out there of where it hasn't worked so well or where there have been some speed wobbles that have come good, I think if we can be confident that all of that is been used to inform what we've got in front of us, then we wouldn't need any further work to be done.
Thanks. Okay, so if, Pauline, is yours addressing that, and is yours addressing that point of Yanni's? Okay, so hang on a sec. That's on.
That was on Yanni's point, yeah, because his issue is something that isn't a problem in our area, but it sounds like
I can think of two in our community board area which have been dealt with. They've been raised by either an elected member or a member of the community or the group itself, and
I think
have
just
been worked with the staff.
We've got a couple of live examples in this in your collective area at the moment that we're working on.
Okay, so what I think at the moment is that we don't, while there's been an individual concern raised about that, but we don't, it seems like the meeting generally doesn't need further information on that, so we won't take it as an action point. But Yanni, I'm happy to chat to you about it offline to see if there's anything further we can do without adding to the workload of staff on that particular point at the moment. So we'll move on to the next point. Pauline.
Thank you.
Hang on, we'll just go back round again. So
going
Pauline
back to the affordability issue, it could go the other way potentially, where a community or some organisation is running the centre and their prices go up and they're not affordable.
Yeah.
So I know we will have a lease in place, but would it also be quite good to construct an MOU with anyone that's, so that we have an expectation in there that they're also, on the same page as council and providing a service.
Yeah, Pauline. Yeah, very good point. Our most recent work in that area, and I'll use the Littleton Recreation Centre. In their activation agreement, which is not a lease because they didn't want the legal implications of the lease, there is a clause in there over setting fees and charges that they are reasonably consistent with council's fees and charges. And if there is a decision to change markedly, that this is discussed with community governance staff and, if necessary, with the community board.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. Insurance. Does council cover insurance for all the facilities?
Yes, we do. We always cover building insurance. We insist that organisations leasing facilities and at times activating facilities get public liability insurance. It's very important they get that for themselves. We give really good advice on the level at which they should get and where to go to get the very best price. It's not usually prohibitively expensive, but we do take that into account when we're setting lease charges or the amount of services that council will pay for. We may do extra maintenance, we may do the grounds if the organisation would struggle to get public liability insurance. You should get that and we should do the grounds rather than we buy public liability insurance for someone else.
Okay.
Okay. And then Yanni.
Thank you. Sorry, you're getting a bit of a workover this morning, John.
It's been 30 months. We expect it. Yeah.
Thank you. Just thinking about future need and growth, and monitor population increase in the southwest and north of the city, and advocate for the inclusion of community facilities and wider town planning processes. Can you explain a bit about that process, what that looks like?
Yes, I can. And again, I'll probably refer to Mike's earlier observation. There are two areas of town that we've got our eyes on through this plan. Firstly, it's the north between Belfast and sort of Preston's area. There's a lot of development southwest. So as new properties are being consented, as communities are being planned, our goal is to talk with our urban planners and our development to keep abreast of the increased population and in the town planning processes where firstly we can secure land and then secondly secure the requirement for a community facility or indeed another another development. So it's a joined up approach through the council. That one, on a council-wide basis, would probably be led by Paul and his team in Civic, working with local teams, but we'd also work with town planning, transport, and our colleagues in recreation and sport and parks to provide that joined up approach.
Maybe community boards could have a bit of a input in
absolutely.
there in terms of recognising the need for growth. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Once we've done the higher work, we'd certainly go to the board at the centre of all of these community facility decisions.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm aware that we've spent a significant amount of time on this already. Yanni's got another question, and Mike, if you've got any changes that you were talking about earlier, could you flick those through? Thanks. Yanni?
In response to the submissions, I note that there was concern around the working with schools. So I just wondered if we'd considered strengthening anything to do with the Ministry of Education. Obviously the Shirley Boys, the old, facility that could have been used for community, pretty tragic what happened there. And I know council was going to have an MOU with the MOE, but we don't seem to have had much progress on that. I don't know how other people feel, but just listening to the submission this morning, particularly around that martial arts, it does seem to me that we're missing a huge opportunity to work with the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, I have to say that we work with the Ministry of Education deeply and regularly, and I think gave the last example of over the early learning centres. When, say, someone like Joanna Gould talked about stakeholders, certainly Ministry of Education are stakeholders. School groups are users of our facility, and I think you can take, it's inherently included in the plan that we would work with schools and education providers. We do that as a matter of course. In my personal opinion, probably doesn't need strengthening, but if there's a desire to have that strengthened, we'll be happy to do it, because we do it anyway.
I note in areas like Redcliffs we've managed to work with the ministry to have buildings and stuff too, and the same in New Brighton.
But we seem to have a very ad hoc system for working. Like, I don't know if you guys remember when ministry came in with a big map with all the properties that they were looking at, and we actually had some quite good conversations to start with, but we haven't had that for several years now, and also it seems to be all happening ad hoc without any strategic thinking.
Okay,
So
maybe
if you take
John,
the Shirley Boys Auditorium, classic example.
so is there specific wording that you would like changed in the plan, or would you like another discussion on that at another time?
I think it would be good to put
I
in
think
the
it's a fair comment.
implementation plan is that we ask for an MOU to be signed with the Ministry of Education about how we can make the most out of community facilities.
You have to have two to sign an agreement,
That's
so if
right.
there's only one talking.
So John, you said
strategically
that
with the
this
Ministry of
this is
Education.
work that you've said that you're doing anyway.
Yep.
So are you happy to add some wording in there?
Yes, I am.
That council staff work with the Ministry for Education to make the best use of
Existing and
community
future
opportunities,
facility opportunities.
something like that.
Yep.
Okay. So
Yep.
if we can
With
get some
respect, I mean, staff
D.
already said that they felt that didn't need to be strengthened, it's already in there. And I don't think it does either. I think that we're always on the lookout for opportunities like that.
Sam might be happy to second that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some wording going in. If it's already there, it's just repeating something that's already there. And if it moves us on right now, I'm.
Chair, may I have one more question?
Yes.
Why regarding implementation until the December of next year report back to the committee? Because I'm concerned they cross the two different kind of the annual plan. Probably start at June. That's for this year financial. Because while I review 5.4 paragraph, first bullet point, the last bullet point, all in relation to the funding for groundwork, maintenance, and funding to operate. So this cause the two kind of annual plan or long-term plan, a moment uncertainty for long-term plan, how come to report back? I don't know.
So
whether maybe June is the best or July is the best time.
So, Jimmy,
Yes.
this is only on the implementation. This is reporting back on the implementation. It's not about funding new facilities.
No funding.
Yeah.
It's not about funding for new facilities. But because it's in December, it will be able to inform the next annual plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we might just try and wind that up now, unless there's any. I think Phil's moving it and Sam's seconding it. Sure. Yeah, so we've got some additional stuff on here. Okay, so if everyone has a wee look up on the screen for the wording. Are people comfortable with that? Was there anything that you wanted to... Oh, you've put it through?
Excuse me, Sarah. I'm wondering if we could get it a bit bigger. The text, it's actually really quite difficult to read.
And she's got her glasses on too.
I'll remember that, Sam.
Are we able to make the text a little bit bigger on the screen?
I hold a grudge. Big time.
And I think Mike said he sent some wording through to Aidan.
Great. I was actually asking on behalf of Phil.
What was your... It's a...
I don't like that, those two sentences that talk about no significant major gaps.
So what was it addressed in?
No, I've put forward an amendment to actually, I don't like wordsmithing things in committee meetings, but I'm making a decision because it's the last piece of the
Okay.
And I've put through an amendment of suggested word changes via an email to Aidan.
Okay. So it may not need to be an amendment though. So if Sam and Phil are happy, once it's up.
Not a resolution, it's just an amendment in the document, isn't it?
Yeah, but that would need to be passed by a recommendation. Yeah.
Is it just a noting amendment? Well, it's more than noting because it will actually change the wording in the draft plan that's in front of us.
Yeah.
It basically just says to take out those first two sentences on page 8, which refer to the no significant geographical gap.
8 of the plan. So what page on our agenda?
27, and change it to the citywide map of the distribution of facilities in Figure 3 provides an overview of all council and non-council owned facilities across the district. So it's just taking out the comment that there's no significant major geographical gap.
So you're not distinguishing between geographical gaps and then the access to those facilities?
I just fundamentally don't like that paragraph in there.
Okay.
Because I believe there is significant gaps already.
Where, for example? Could you give an
I'm
example?
really sorry
so
for
just so the staff can get an idea what
Oh,
you're
sorry,
thinking.
Leanne's got a...
Excuse me, I'm really sorry for interrupting, but I cannot hear anyone who doesn't switch on their mic.
Apologies.
Mike?
Mike.
Everything I was saying was really good. Mike's on. Alright. I just want to replace, there's a couple of sentences on page 27 of the agenda refers to be no significant major geographical gap when you look at both community council and community owned facilities. I disagree, and a lot of the feedback we received also disagrees with that, so I just wanted to change that to show that actually that figure 3 just provides the overview of all the council and non-council owned facilities, and actually not mention the fact that there are no significant major gaps, because I think that's subjective.
Okay.
Well, what's in
hang on.
Redwood?
It's just, so, Melanie?
What's in Preston?
Melanie, are you happy with that, or...? Okay.
From my point, I actually ideally wanted it included within the document, because that would sort of have worked with, like the similar one to how they're working upon assessing the condition. If we said about doing what Mike said is fine, and then having it in the implementation plan is good.
Yeah. I mean, John, my impression would be that it wouldn't change the guidelines to how we make the decisions.
No, it wouldn't.
It's just,
we're
it just
relaxed
takes
about
out something
that being removed.
that has got people's...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The document, through you, Sarah, is a decision-making framework.
Yeah.
That remains entirely intact, and we'd be comfortable with that sentence being removed. It wouldn't change anything.
Okay, Anne?
I'm wondering if 1A could be amended slightly to include the words current and future. So continue to develop capacity in current current and future in the community.
In the community to operate.
And activate. So I'm worried about
Current
future
and future
growth.
facilities.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I'm wondering how we
So after activate in
activate.
A, current and future.
Yeah. Capacity. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just need to, are people generally comfortable with Mike's amendment? So we just need to find it, so take it out as an amendment, but copy and put it in, so it'd be 1D. It would come in there. Because it's a change to the draft.
So you've got to be happy with those changes.
Sorry.
No,
I'm going to...
no, it can't be there.
That's right.
So it can't be, because it's amending.
Phil can't see.
These ones are all about Appendix 3. So it has to be subject to replacing the two sentences.
Oh, so it'd have to be a, two.
Speak.
Sorry. Just wait till the wordsmithing's done. What's that? Oh, we just need to make sure that we've got the wording right before we debate it. Yeah. That would be most things.
Just about statement about where we are.
Okay, that's looking good. We are at 11:02. That's okay. That's it. Right. Okay, so we have this wordsmithed and formatted. And Phil, would you like to open the debate, or would you like to just leave it and to close it at the end? Okay, that's the best two-word debate we've had. Pauline.
Oh yeah, look, just very, very quick, but it's a huge piece of work, and thank you very much. And I think that it signifies a dramatic shift actually in the way council's working, and just to actually have community-led organisations coming up. I think the issue with the mapping is the fact that we have included all facilities, and some of them are specialists, and you might include churches in those. So, you know, what we really need is enough facilities that are just for residents and run by the community or council, but preferably community, for the residents. We've addressed affordability and accessibility, and those two things are very, very important. And the way I see this is that it's a living document. I see it as a living document. I see it as containing some flexibility, because, you know, it's not one size fits all, and that's the key thing we've got to remember with community facilities. And a certain amount of the mapping is actually comparing apples with pears. You've got different facilities in different communities. You've got facilities that are big and are multi-roomed, and you know, they can apply to lots of different interests in the community, and therefore they have an ability to bring in more income, and other facilities that are very small and are much more limited. So it's a very broad and diverse piece of work, this. But as I say, to me, it's a living, flexible document in response to community needs, changing communities, and I think the driver of these things has to be community boards, and the relationship with the community development teams and council staff all working together with communities to keep an eye on things. And I think this is a big step forward. So thanks for the amazing amount of work, and I'll be supporting this today.
Thanks, Pauline. We've got Andrew, Tim, then Mel.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge all of the work that's gone into this. I mean, this has taken some time to put together as a plan which is capable of approval today. and the conversations that led to it and that started this piece of work have been going on through various annual plans, long-term plans, activity plans, conversations at community board, conversations in the community for a very long time. In fact, even since before the time I was elected to a community board in 2010. So it's good to see this finally land in a plan which is in front of us in this way today. I do support the softening of the requirement or the perceived requirement for there to be a partnership in place for a community facility to be developed. I think we always need to bear in mind that different communities have got different degrees of capacity, capability and willingness to enter into a partnership. And often it's those communities where there's greatest need for community facilities, where it's least likely that we'll find a community organisation which is able to partner. That's not across the board. And of course that speaks to another matter that this plan I think reflects quite well, which that whilst not all community facilities are the same, and Pauline made that point very well, not all communities are the same. So we cannot take a one-size-fits-all approach. We need the flexibility to work with different communities, if in different ways, according to their capacity, capability, willingness, and so on. And in that regard, we've got the table at figure 4, which has got the different capacities that council and community can have in various different relationships. And my expectation would be that even though that's well laid out and sets out opportunities, that there's plenty of flexibility even within that table at figure 4 to realise that different facilities, different communities will require different approaches, some of which we may not have even thought of yet. But now, in general, I welcome this piece of work. I think it reflects a direction that we've been wanting to move in for some time, and I look forward to seeing it been implemented and getting that report back.
Thank you. And I think we'll start the timer for the next ones. So we have Tim, then Mel, then Yanni, then Anne, then Jimmy.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for this is a huge step forward and it's a huge amount of work, so thank you. I guess just the thing in the back of my mind is when a resident came to us and talked to us about residents coming rather than groups or committees or whatever, so to ensure that connection to a facility for all residents rather than just perhaps the want of a better term, the usual suspects and those that are governing those community facilities through and for the council and their communities are open to all residents, and we have to ensure that that is the case, and also that good connection to our community boards. So I think that's the best way forward with that, and we've got to ensure that. So I'd be really deeply concerned and disappointed if that were not the case. So I think that's really got to be taken on board and listened to, but also with our community facility, our community board staff as well. So, yeah, I think that's a real key for me. So, thank you very much. No timer required on that one, Sue.
Thank you. Mel, then Yanni, then Anne, then Jimmy.
I mean, I think community facilities are very important, especially probably to community boards, because they are local facilities. I'd like to thank John and Paul for being amenable to all the changes that we've suggested, because I think that's very important. Community facilities are really important for community building, and sometimes the community is there first, or they've lost their facility, and then we build one for them, or we help them in that process. And it's not easy, even if you've got a partner. It can take 8 to 10 years to get a facility back up and running or built again. And sometimes there's the opposite, where there's an empty building and you're trying to find, I've been through the process of trying to find people who will run that space, and that is a difficult one, and it relies on our community development advisors and the support of the board and rallying individuals in the community to get together who don't know each other to be able to do something. And they can do it, but they can't do it alone. They need community governance staff and community board members to be behind that, and it can happen. So it really is important for developing community capacity building and all that some people don't necessarily have or believe that they have, but they can find it within themselves. So I just think this is really important for us, so thanks.
Thanks, Mel. Yanni?
I think, I appreciate the work that's been done on this, and I'm happy with about 80% of it, but the 20% that I'm really uncomfortable with is the 1B2, which is increasing the number of council-owned facilities operated and activated by community organisations. And I know you've put some slightly more wording at the end around appropriate capacity and capability, but to me this feels very much like the Tomorrow Schools model, and I think we really need to look at the assessment of how that's worked or not worked. And what's really clear from that review, which I spent a lot of time reading, says there's no evidence to suggest that current self-governing schools model has been successful in raising student achievement or improving equity as was intended. And it goes on to say children from disadvantaged homes, too many Māori and Pacific families, and those with significant additional learning needs remain those most poorly served by the system. And the point that is made in that review is that for far too often we've put huge governance and statutory responsibility on boards of trustees, and I don't think that's unsimilar to the idea that the community should run council-owned facilities. It's not to say that there's not a place for it, and I support it where it can happen, but I don't think we should set a goal of sort of in a key direction of trying to increase it. That should be done when the community wants to do it, not us saying this is something that we're going to push you towards, which I feel that this part of the strategy does. I think what's really important though is that we do have community input, and just not having community governance of facilities or community management doesn't mean that you wouldn't have community representation around focusing on the things that are important to that community. And again, just to stress, that's one of the key things that came out of the Board of Trustees review into Tomorrow Schools, was that people dealing with complex issues like human resource issues, employment law, technical building maintenance issues are often don't have the understanding and the expertise in those fields, and can spend a lot of time focusing on that rather than on the key things, which is what's important to that community. So I strongly disagree with the approach that we're taking around increasing the number of our facilities that we want the community to run. I think it will have devastating consequences in parts of the city, and I don't support that direction. But the other final point I wanted to make is that, people just say that the Ministry of Education is working well with us as a city. I just can't accept that. We definitely need to improve that relationship. What happened in Shirley, we had a perfectly good hall being left vacant for a number of years, vandalised at a huge expensive cost to the taxpayer, was just an absolute tragedy that should never have happened. And we did try after the earthquake to get some agreement with the Ministry of Education at how we could work with them on the future of facilities in both new schools and the ones that they had vacated, and that clearly hasn't worked. So I support doing more in that space. So I just ask you to put the resolutions separate, particularly 1B too.
Thanks, Yanni. Anne?
Kia ora, and thank you for the work that's been done. I know it's been huge. And this is, I think, all about strengthening the voice of our community boards and managing and planning for facilities in their local area. And so getting that local knowledge is vital, and knowledge is power. So I'm really pleased that you're going to be giving information to the community board that will help them to understand what's available in their communities, how it's being used, and they can use that knowledge to then better equip and fulfil the needs of the community. So thank you for the work that you've done. We are totally supportive of what you've got here in front of us. It's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Jimmy?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to remind all our first-term councillors, actually this the staff in response, to the Hagley College and integrate with all the Christchurch multi-ethnic community group. They make a submission during the annual plan or long-term plan. In that time, staff feedback to the council, particularly emphasize would like to to the established community facility network plan. So am I right, John? Yeah, I remember it's kind of so this take probably 2.5 years already, but at least this is kind of the guiding document. It's not a kind of a standard, but at least it is the principle. We can follow this principle guideline to engage or even or work in a partnership with the other community. And also this community, we are all aware, it's not only the geographic community, actually it's cover all the demographic community. So different community probably have a different the request. But anyway, this one, my view, actually, let's maximize all those the facility to be the utility, to fill the gap between the demand from the wider community and from the supply council and some other kind of government agency, provider, etc. So that's a good beginning. But regarding the further one, I think from now on, after the 1 year, that's very crucial and important. We can take this 1 year, engage all those kind of the wider community, can gather the kind of the first-hand information. So after 1 year, December next year, when the staff presented to this community, we can get the overall picture and have further maybe amendment for this kind of plan and for the future the practical needs. So I think that's very crucial. So generally speaking, I fully support this plan.
Thanks, Jimmy. Mike.
Thank you, and I'll be quick, Sam. Look, thanks for all the work, and obviously this has taken a long time to actually get to this point. And although the plan obviously has a little bit of strategic context in there, the reality, this is a stock take of where we currently sit in terms of council-owned facilities and community-owned facilities. That's what it is. And I think figure 3 highlights actually the amount of facilities there are. But we just got to be a little bit careful, I guess, when we look at that to realise not all facilities created equal, and the ability for community groups to access them is limited depending on that group's ability. So I think this is really good. It's going to aid in our decision making as we move forward and working out where there are gaps, but it's how we actually try and get the data through to actually show where the true gaps are and not where the gaps looked to be.
Thank you. Phil, would you like to close the debate? Oh, Leanne. Yep, Leanne.
Yes, I wasn't going to contribute to this debate, but I think Yanni's comments really have compelled me to do so. I really want to focus on the words appropriate capacity and capability to do so. If you had approached the Aronga Community Trust in the year 2000 and said to them, would you like to run the local facility? Actually, they would have said yes back then because it would have been better than the arrangement that was in place with another community group running it. But in fact, the work that went into that community, developing a sense of trust and building capacity and capability on the ground, has actually enabled that community to find itself in an equivalent position to the Littleton community, which had that capacity, and I think Andrew's identified that right from the get-go when the earthquakes happened. Both communities were in the position to step up and really support their communities in a very upfront and personal way, but with incredible capacity and capability. And in a disaster, we all know that these communities find within themselves they have this capability and capacity, which is why I never like to refer to the to a phrase that suggests that we're giving them something, that we're empowering them. The power is within. It's just the question of self-belief and the ability to actually act. I think that our facilities are an ideal base for building capacity and capability within communities. And so I do want to support this particular part of the motion. And I want to pay tribute to the community of Aronga. I'd like to pay tribute to the community of Littleton, because they represent the very best of what we can be and what a number of communities across the city would aspire to be if they were given a sense of trust and belief by their local council. So I do urge councillors to support the whole resolution.
Thank you. And with that, I'll put them all together, Yanni, but if you'd like to have your vote recorded against any of those, just let us know which ones. 1B2? Okay, so all in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against the whole thing? No, and just Yanni recorded against 1B2. Thank you. Okay, so we will break now and we will come back in 15 minutes, so at 11:35, and we'll see if we can get the rest of it finished by the lunch break. Will be really good. Thank you very much.
sounds good. No, I mean, we've spoken quite extensively and talked about the climate change strategy. This is really just to confirm that we're now intending to go out for public consultation in parallel with the LTP, and also the recommendation that we set up a working group of elected members.
Are there any questions? Mike, then Yanni.
Sorry, just quickly, so there's no risk of this not being ready to go out for consultation? Confident that'll be already in?
It will be already.
Cool, excellent.
We're well down the track with the development. We've got a really, close to a final draft, which we met with Sarah recently, and we're just incorporating some final feedback, and then we'll share that with councillors next year, early next year.
Okay, thank you. And the other one, 5.17 on page 56, it says, following councillor feedback, staff will also consider opportunities for further stakeholder. So, will you do it or not?
We've had some discussions. We don't intend to do any more sort of formal pre-engagement. We've talked through, we're maintaining contact with we call it the technical advisory group, but there's good membership of that across youth, academia, unions representation, the Chamber of Commerce. So we are keeping them informed, and following the last briefing, we've asked for their feedback on some of the modelling work. So we will, continue to engage through our networks, rather than any other formal engagement.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Yanni.
Yeah, thanks. I was just seeing in the report under 5 points. It's just under 7.1, cost to implement. Approve the cost of establishing the working group will be met from existing budgets. Expected to be low and would be met within existing budgets. Funding source, existing operational budgets. But given how much pressure we've had on our budgets, can you at least give us some sense of what the cost anticipated will be?
So the cost of the working group would effectively be staff time. So there's no other additional costs of establishing a working group.
So just be clear, this doesn't include the costs of actually dealing with climate change and any additional work for other policies and things as part of this.
Yeah, I know, but we've just been told that we've got to reduce the number of meetings. We've got other parts of the organisation telling us that we don't have resource and capacity to get stuff done. We're now doing something new, but we don't have any sense of the financial cost, but also actually what other things may get deferred if we agree. I mean, I'm not against it, but I just think we should have visibility about how this can actually be delivered in our current financial situation, because
So staff have given us advice that it is able to be done within current budgets. Emma, do you know if there's anything that will be bumped to be able to do this?
No, we wouldn't envisage that. I mean, it is staff time, but we are spending that time already really in our liaison and preparation for presenting to this committee and council. So it will just be a more formalised arrangement of a working group where staff and elected members to get together. So it won't have any impact on other work.
So things like the grey water, sustainability of water supply, which I'm told we don't have resource to do. That's not going to, things like that are not going to impact on strategy and planning. That's not going to get delayed more because of this.
Different staff. They're different staff.
Are they? Which staff is that? Strategy and planning?
So this is in the strategic policy team, so the natural environment team. So it would be myself and members from the policy team and natural environment team.
Yeah. So cool. Just the only other thing I wanted to check is this is really good and it's really important. And I'm just concerned that a number of council-controlled organisations and companies are doing their own thing. Is there any ability to come up with a joint strategy across our council companies around how we respond to climate change, so that we seem to be on the same page, but also not surprising each other or having a more consistent approach. And I'm just mindful of the deputations we heard last week from certain people, groups that are mentioned in here, around their concern at what was going on, and it did seem a bit disconnected. So I just wondered if there's any thought to what we can do to get a more joint up approach with our council organisations and companies.
I mean, we absolutely recognise that we are going to need to do this in partnership with the community and as well as our other CCHO companies. I think we've shared the strategy with them, and they've participated in workshops and had input into that. So I think there will always be tensions in terms of some of the competing kind of priorities, but that is just something we will need to tackle as part of addressing climate change. One, I think there's really good opportunities. So we are talking with Orion, and we see that some of the work that they are doing around measurement and offsetting. So we are very much ensuring kind of sharing expertise and working closely with those companies.
Jimmy.
Regarding to the consultation, I remember every council strategic document, when the draft has been ready, always to establish those hearing panel, to listen to those, review all those written submission or oral submission. But now we established a kind of working group. So what's the difference regarding to this between these?
No, so the consultation will go out in parallel with the LTP, and we will hear the submissions. We still need to work out with the hearings team exactly how that will form. The working group is separate to that. We would like to get a working group set up and established so that we can get that input and ideas as we develop the strategy and on some of the current work that we are doing. So the working group is intended to, sort of oversee and have oversight of the implementation of the climate change strategy. So it's more than just hearing the submissions.
Yeah, but the consultation will still have organized hearing panel.
I would envisage we'll have a hearings panel. We just need to talk, yes,
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we just need to speak with Megan Pearce about how that will fit in. But yes, there will be a hearings panel to hear the submissions on the strategy.
Okay, but didn't mention you here.
No, we will come back when we present the final draft strategy for approval.
Yes.
We'll then provide some more detail and information on the hearings process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? If not, do I have a mover for the report? Mike and Jimmy. Okay, is there any debate? No? Oh, Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I think that just the consultation with the communities is really important, because we've got to take everybody with us, and if we don't take the community with us and it becomes a council climate, then that's kind of going to miss the point. So, yeah, I think it's really good. And thank you very much for the work you've done.
Thank you.
Jimmy?
Yeah, that's very crucial. Particularly the council already declared this city is kind of climate change and also technology for the emergency of the city. So the strategy is very, very crucial and important. So we look forward to this draft that will be ready in February next year, start at the same time. And also, council would like to organize, study those wider.
I would like to, sorry, yeah. It's wider, those kind of working group, and through all the regular and formal consultation process. So we look forward to, this document can leading us, to fully the comply with all and the implementation of climate change, the emergency declaration. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And with that, I will put it. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? I declare that carried. Katie and Emma, thank you so much for your work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, now we move to the community loan scheme. So we have Sam come and talk to that. And Sam, you were looking at moving the recommendation with a different questions. Yeah. That's what everyone says.
Good morning. Any
Right.
questions?
Okay, I'll take it as read, and Sam's got a question.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. So just on this, you've talked about the ability for the club to repay.
Yep.
So you're obviously taking quite a conservative approach. I've had some correspondence with them sort of in the last 24 hours where they've talked about the approach they've taken is quite conservative as well. So
Let's see.
the 40 grand loan will basically minimise, I guess, their reserves. But at the same time, if they were able to have a bit more, there'll be additional savings for them, which means they might be able to repay it quicker. Do you guys have a view on the sort of conservative approach that was taken? Or?
To our assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think it explains in the matrix kind of where the finance unit took it, and I went with them on that, which was that they have cash flow, sorry for the mess of papers, they've got kind of annual estimated cash flow from the previous few years of financial statements of around about $7,000, and the repayments on the 40k loan is about 5.5. So we're leaving them a little bit of buffer there. So as you say, an increase from 40 to say 50,000 would give them a bit more of a buffer in this project and some comfort. If they don't need that, I'm sure they'd be happy to repay it early, and that would work. If they did need it, then it would put a little bit more financial pressure over the next few years as they repay, but not beyond what's conceivable for repayment.
So what would be the, like in your, I guess, professional assessment, the maximum you would go to? So there's a recommendation there, but what would the level of comfort be from the organisation in terms of how high, if we were to change that number, it could go?
Yeah, that's a
might be a
tricky
question
one
for
to do on
John,
the
even
fly.
potentially.
I feel that 40 was the spot that we felt would not put them under a burden that they couldn't handle, and be enough for them to successfully complete their project. But I wouldn't want to go higher than 50 as a staff recommendation.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, because they have had that $100,000 loan in the past.
They have, yeah,
which
they've got a good track
successfully
record,
repaid.
and they're a stable club.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, can I just signal then that I'm happy to move that subject to changing it to 50,000?
You can move 50. And Tim's happy to second. Melanie, question?
If it was 50,000, would that be over 8 years?
That's as it stands at the moment. Yeah.
If it was 50,000, would it be over 8 years rather than say 10? Which is
Fine. Okay.
So 50, just to
yeah.
answer in more detail, I've been looking at my spreadsheet trying to do that while answering. To increase it to 50,000 over 8 years would increase their annual repayment on the loan to 6,778, which puts them kind of just below what their annual kind of cash flow reserves are. So it's on that borderline.
Yeah, that's fine, because I mean the correspondence I've had with them is that there's additional sources of revenue that they can invest in that other squash clubs and the like are using. So yeah, they seem pretty comfortable with it.
The extra 10,000, would that allow them to do something else to the building that would allow them to get extra income back to pay them?
Yep. Yeah, there's two different aspects which will get them a couple of thousand more a year. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Melanie?
Do you think, Sam, it might be better to make it over 10 years? Or do you think
I think
8
I'm
years?
comfortable with 8.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen with other loans, if it becomes an issue, council has been pretty approachable around resetting terms, etc. And if future councils are of the same mind, then it wouldn't be an issue. But to help these orgs not be burdened with debt forever, it's good to, try and push it a bit short if we can.
Okay. Any further questions? No. Any debate?
Just
so
to
it's
say,
moved by
yeah.
Sam, seconded by Tim, and Sam.
Yeah, just really briefly. I mean, to me, this is a really good example of how the council can enable the community. So, I mean, this virtually provides no cost to the ratepayer. There's, an interest which is higher than what we borrow it for, which enables them to partner with the Burnside Rugby Club and to, really get some tangible assets on effectively land that's ours. They've got a really proven track record, and as you'll know, I'm relatively conservative with this stuff, but the fact that I'm asking for an additional 10 grand on their behalf should give you some comfort that I don't think they're going to show up not being able to pay it back. So I'd be really grateful if everyone can support it.
Thanks, Sam. Anyone else? No, in that case, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Declare that carried. Okay, so we're next moving to the discretionary response fund. So that's you again, Sam.
Yep. And I've come to join if required.
Welcome, Gary.
So Gary's been
Long time no see.
Gary's been very involved in the Hapai, with the Hapai organisation, so he'll answer questions relating to the specific application.
Excellent. I'll take it as read. Is there anything you need to add? No. Any questions? Do I have a mover? Anne, and seconded Melanie. Is there any debate? No? In that case, I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Just like that.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Sure, good.
Heritage Incentive Grant funding, updates to eligibility guidelines. I think what we might do here is, I mean, we have done a workshop on this. If we can discuss both of them at the same time, that's probably easiest. I'm not sure there'd be any additional questions. Are there any additional questions from anyone on these? No. Sam, yep.
One, if that's okay. So just in terms of the recommendation, where it says approve a continuation of the carryover provision for unallocated heritage incentive grants. So does that mean that the 1.5 we've got on budget now, if that's not spent next year, it would in theory be 3 million?
Oh no, we've got that 1.5 million. Any of that 1.5 million that isn't allocated this year would roll over to the next financial year. The balance, not additional 1.5 million.
There is no current 1.5 million in the next year.
Yep, no okay, so it's just carrying it forward until it's
just the
depleted.
last.
Yep, perfect. Cool.
Yep. Okay. No questions on either of those two papers? Right, do I have a mover for item 11? Jimmy and Andrew for seconding. Any debate? I'll put that all. Oh, Andrew, sorry.
Thank you. And just very briefly, I welcomed the heritage strategy when it was adopted, and certainly the way that heritage strategy was put together with the input of a large number of people from across the heritage community and the wider community was exemplary. It's great to now see adjustments to the funding regime that allow us to better implement that heritage strategy and that reflect the provisions, particularly as regards, and I realise this is the other report, and I promise I won't debate the second one as well, that reflect the movable and intangible heritage. So I think what we've got to is a strategy that really works for the city, and now a funding regime that's perfectly aligned with that strategy. So, yeah, this is a big step forward.
Thank you. Any further debate? No, in that case, I'll put that one. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Do I have a mover for item 12? Andrew and then Mike. I know, but he's promised not to debate it, so I'm giving him the moving. Any debate on this one? No. Yes.
This is very important, because recently I've been invited to attend a couple of the incentive, have the kind of activity event. That's very, very crucial, particularly why the community group and the showcase, they're the kind of activities for us, Actually, this also, is contribute, comply with our the heritage strategy, for implementation. That's very, very crucial. So very impressed. So they're very important. So fully support this one.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much for all your work on that one.
Thank you. Thank you. See you in the new year.
You too. Have a good Christmas. Sustainability Fund. Welcome, Tony.
Hello.
Okay, so we're likely to have some questions on this, but I'll get you to do a brief intro first.
Okay.
And then I think the applications that we've got are actually in the PX section. If people are wanting to discuss those, and there were some indications that people did, we might move briefly into PX to discuss those, then come back out for the finishing of the discussion and the decision.
Sure. Thank you very much. Well, we are thrilled to have the Sustainability Fund offering and supporting community projects looking at our climate change goals. So it's obviously helping to support community projects, school projects, business projects that are aligning with our goals of minimising emissions, but also building resilience, supporting resilience. So we've got a really great range of projects. We're looking at having 2 funding rounds. So this is the first funding round, and we're looking to do the next one. Well, we still need to land exactly when you're available later in the year, but towards the end of the financial year anyway. And then, so we've received a good number of applications. Not all of them were stunning. We had, but in terms of the types of projects, we did receive a lot of education projects, and so there was obviously a need under the heading of climate change to actually really encourage more awareness and more personal and action on climate change. So there's a whole range of projects around education that have come through. We've also got some around transport and water and biodiversity and food. The way that the advice has been provided to you is we've had an evaluation panel, and that evaluation panel was made up of council staff from across the organisation. We also had a number of technical advisors from different parts of the council, so transport and waste and the parks unit gave us technical advice around some of the applications. So we've received some detailed information from them, and we've feed that into the recommendations we're providing to you today. I'm happy to answer questions when about the individual projects.
Any generic questions to start with? So,
It's one by one item or just general?
if there's a general question about the fund and how it's done yet. Okay. So Tim?
Just if you're looking at the whole philosophy of what we're trying to do, what group here is actually targeting, say, an area of our community that's not interested?
That's not interested.
And climate change, they're just living their life, doing their thing. We've got issues with our yellow bin, etc., our green bin. So there are a large, and I'm presuming a large area in our community that are just living life, whether they just are concentrating on feeding the family, which is totally, acceptable. I'm just wondering, because you go to events, whether what they are, and you're preaching to the converted, and you're getting better ideas. So I'm just wondering. That's all.
Yes. So you are right that if you have an interest in this area, you're more likely to be participating in the sorts of activities that are proposed. It is hard to reach people who are generally not interested, and I think what our approach has been is to work with the willing as best we can, and then hopefully grow that as a snowball. So I think some of these projects really do give more motivation and momentum behind the willing, but they won't appeal to those that are generally not interested. That's correct.
Yep, Jimmy.
I'm not sure this funding, because some of the in relation to the minimize those waste, they apply funding from the Canterbury the Waste Joint Committee, But this one they also apply. I'm not sure whether there's any grey area.
Yes, yeah. So the intention.
Just want to know.
That's
yes.
right. So the intention of this fund is to support projects that haven't been funded by the council
Yes.
already. So we can talk about some details around that.
Okay.
But also that we're not the first port of call for projects to come to. They may have received other support from the community, from businesses, or from other funds that are available in Christchurch and beyond.
Okay.
So the intention of this fund is to support projects that are delivering practical action on the ground.
Okay.
And the terms of reference, I think that's been circulated for you, so you can see the purpose of the fund and the criteria that the fund uses.
Yes.
And one of those criteria is to have a tangible benefit. Obviously, that this a legacy really for Christchurch,
Yes.
but also that it's deliverable. And then in the deliverable piece, it's really saying, do you have the skills and resources available for you to carry out this work? And that's the key question we're asking when we're looking at the funding, the resourcing they've got.
Okay.
But in terms of the overlaps between council funds, we
Yes.
try and minimise that through having on our evaluation panel
Yes.
the Strengthening Communities fund manager as well. So we get a sense of what other funds are being put to community projects.
Okay.
And because if there is a waste project, for example, we would
Yes.
then go to the waste team and ask them of their perspective on this project, but also what funding they've allocated to projects.
Okay.
So it's trying to be holistic and inclusive.
Okay, thank you.
Anne, and then Yanni.
Kia ora, just when you assess an application, do you actually look at whether this work is being done in the communities by other groups? So I'm thinking about, for example, one of the goals is to enhance ecosystem resilience and nature-based green infrastructure solutions. So there are a lot of groups that are doing that work already and that we are funding. And I'm also thinking about Enviro Schools and the work that they are doing. Do you assess an application in that light? Do you use that lens when you decide on whether to give a group money or not?
So the intention is to have the evaluation panel to have a good view of what is happening already in the community. The question you've asked around a particular organisation doing something already, clearly if that organisation had applied to this fund, we could then consider them as part of this bundle, but we haven't gone out and shoulder tapped anyone. We've said the fund is open, we've communicated it to the Christchurch community, and we've then received these applications. So when we're considering the applications themselves, we need to take into account the value the proposal is going to give to Christchurch, but also if there is other activities underway that would do the same thing. And clearly there is a lot of need, I suppose, in many ways. And you mentioned in the biodiversity area, there's lots of people working in that space. So that is true. There will, but we've just evaluated what was in front of us, what the proposals were, and then what were the value, how it aligned to the purpose of the fund, and how it aligned to the criteria. And then the evaluation panel and the technical advisors gave us that wider view on what else is going on.
So in terms of the strategic overview of the city, you kind of take that into account. We're a bit like we've been just talking about community facilities, and we've done a bit of an audit really about what's available in the city and what's being used. Is that part of the discussion? You look at that big picture?
Yeah.
Yeah?
So that is, I suppose it's not a specific criteria in the sense that we're not looking at, so the applicants aren't being asked to give us information about what is already out there. So we're looking at the application as it's come in and the merits of the application, and then based on our knowledge of what else is happening, we then can make a decision on that. Yeah.
Right, Yanni.
I just wanted to stand back because the Housing Trust has got applications into the fund. So
For that particular one.
yeah, well, but also actually, my general feeling is that if a group that you're with is applied to a fund, giving it to others, voting on giving it to others, it, can have an impact or not have an impact. So I'll just stand back from the whole report, given there's two applications in from the Housing Trust. So I just wanted to make that clear and disclose that.
Yeah. Pauline.
Quick one on the finances. I think these add up to just roughly 123 or something. Is it? I'm just questioning whatever it is. The total fund is 442. Are we likely to see that called on this financial year?
So our expectation is to fully allocate the fund every year. That you've put aside money for this purpose, and our intention is to allocate it to projects every year.
And we have two rounds this financial year, so we'll have a second.
But you've got a big chunk of it left.
Yeah.
But we do have the opportunity, because in the terms of reference, when this fund was set up, to roll over the funds. So if it's unspent, this financial year, if we don't find projects that are worthy of supporting, then it will roll over to the following financial year.
So is it 400 a year?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that obviously there was 23 held over from last year or 22.
Correct.
So that adds to the 400.
Yes.
Was that 23 held over, or was that returned funds when a project didn't happen, I think?
No, it was rolled over from, it was effectively a commitment
Yeah.
for one of the projects that
then
we're going to
didn't.
discuss today.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions that are generic? Okay, so for a couple of specific ones dealing with the actual application forms and things, I think we'll move into PX before we come back out again. So I'm going to move that we move into PX for the protection of commercially confidential information on this paper. Do I have a seconder? Sam? All those in favour? Aye. Any against? No, that's carried. So back into public, and we're on. Mike, you happy to move, are you? Okay, and Jimmy.
The change though to the 1 to 4.
Yeah. 4 or 5?
4. Trying to be nice, but
Okay, so Mike's moved this, but with G at 4.
I'll foreshadow an amendment that G goes to 5. If it's just
Okay, 5 it is. Okay, so as is. Okay, and Jimmy's seconding. Anne.
I would like to amend the amount that's going to Food Bank Aotearoa New Zealand to 50,000 from 20.
Okay, so that's an amendment that Anne's putting.
Yep.
Okay, and Phil,
Can
are
I
you
give
going
a
to have an
reason
amendment
why?
as well?
Pardon?
Hang on a sec, but are you going to do an amendment as well? I'm just trying to line up
Oh,
decision
amendments,
making.
right.
Yep.
Okay.
Me?
Yeah, you've got an amendment.
Yes.
Okay. So what's yours
So
going
Phil's
to be?
supporting that amendment, sorry. Is that
Oh,
right?
no, Phil's got his own.
Oh, he's got it. So,
I'd like to put an amendment in, give it.
No, hang on, I'm just trying to line up the decision making. I'm chairing this meeting.
yeah.
Okay, I'll swap committees if you can. Right, Phil.
I'd like to see us give $1,000 to the that play centre in Little River, please, for its LED lighting.
What letter was it?
It's not on that letter. It's in the.
Okay, it's in the. Okay, so it's on the matrix.
So that's a
Okay, so
100% increase. No, we haven't got seconders yet, have we?
okay. So
I'll second yours if you second mine.
Anne has an.
On that last
Yep.
motion, we're unable
To give.
to more than they've asked for. So
Yeah.
they've requested 450,
Oh.
On Phil's.
405, sorry, and so we're unable to give them more money than they've asked for.
Oh, so okay,
Yeah.
give them what they want.
Okay, so Anne's one first. So Anne has an amendment
Yep.
to take Food Bank Aotearoa to 50,000 from
Yep.
20. Do you have a seconder, Anne?
I hope so.
Not at
Okay.
this stage, Anne.
Can I give a reason why I'd like people to support it or not?
You don't have a seconded amendment, so
Oh,
not at this point.
Well,
Okay.
I want to convince someone to.
Phil, so you have an amendment seconded by James to $405. Is that right? Okay. For Little River Play Centre for their one. Okay, so if we could add that up into the. Okay, so that's an amendment, but if the mover and the seconder, so Mike and Jimmy, are you happy with the $405 being included rather than an amendment? Okay, that's great. So it's just included in the resolutions and no need to do that one separately. I know. Any further changes? No. So we have a mover and a seconder. Do we have any debate on these? Anne?
I would like to debate my reasoning for wanting to give more money to the Food Bank Aotearoa. Food waste contributes hugely to the release of methane into the community, into the environment, which is more deadly and more potent than CO2. And wasting food is not just about that, but it's also, it wastes the energy and the water that's gone into producing and growing it. So it's wasted. Food waste Aotearoa rescues food that doesn't go, so it doesn't go to landfill, and it gives it to people who need it. So in terms of sustainability, this is a fantastic model for what we want to achieve in our city. So they've got a fantastic operation going. They've delivered, they've reused 1,332.7 tonnes of food, kept that from landfill, and as well as benefiting many, many families. So rather than give small amounts of money to groups who are perhaps starting out and wanting to achieve the same thing, wouldn't it be great to actually strengthen what's already happening here and give more money to those that are running a very successful operation, an award-winning operation? They got Social Enterprise of the Year, I think, something like that, a couple of years ago for the New Zealand Business Awards. They're fantastic and they do a great job. So I would have loved for them to have got some more money. But, however, didn't get a seconder, so not able to. But what we see here is obviously going to achieve sustainability, so I'll be supporting what we have here available for them.
Thanks, Anne. Tim?
Thank you. Look, I'll be supporting this. I have a couple of concerns, though. One is that when we have people coming to us with a great idea about sustainability, but there are other things in the universe that are doing the same thing or close to, rather than creating something new to improve what's already there and working together as a team rather than in silos and then coming back later on, all in the name of sustainability, which is ironic, really, isn't it? You know, so I do have a concern about that. I also have a concern about some of the major education organisations, such as universities, which are $100 million plus organisations and budgets, etc., who seem to come for a few peanuts, that these are the organisations that should be leading this, an absolute cutting edge, that should be a lot more than this and be a lot more work with this organisation. So there are a couple of concerns, but I will be supporting this, because when you look up there and you see some really small things that are absolutely essential and start to learn, like rad bikes and the little river lights, when those young people start seeing what can be done, that's really what it's all about. And at the other end, the big end, we seem to get a bit blunt and we shouldn't be.
Thanks, Tim. Anything further? No, in that case, just from the one? Yeah. In that case, all those in favour, please say aye. Any against? Just like that, carried. And just before we... Yeah, just before we close, we'll get, we'll get Anne to close the karakia.
And this is the karakia from Ihurangi, who was here earlier. Unahia ki te uru tapu nui, ki a waitia, ki a mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua. Ki te ara tangata, koia rā e rongo, whaka e ai ruhia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina hui e tā iki e.
Kia ora, thank you, Anne. And